Welcome to OSCAL Central Online, a monthly presentation of OSCAL Central, which is provided as a service to the OSCAL 2-Rail community. This is the September 15, 2024 program. I'm David Vaughn. OSCAL Central is a nonprofit 501c3 IRS tax-exempt membership corporation. Our mission is to promote OSCAL 2-Rail and support modelers in the scale. Information about OSCAL Central, including our trademarked scale-wide product and service guide, our calendar of coming events, information on how to get started in OSCAL 2-Rail, and to connect with the OSCAL community, and to join and participate in OSCAL Central is all on our website, oscalcentral.com. That's oscalcentral.com. Please note that the program is being recorded for rebroadcast on YouTube by continuing.
Sorry, I was in a Zoom meeting. Yeah.
Noted.
It's a train thing.
I'm sorry, can you mute yourself, please?
Yeah.
All right, please note that the program is being recorded for future broadcast on YouTube.
Yes, correct. I'll have notes tomorrow.
Please mute yourself if you're having other conversations.
Campus development team or campus development team, I think is what it's called.
Hello. Okay. Access to these archive programs is available through the OSCAL Central website.
The purpose of the meeting was to review the proposal and it was risk assessment and emergency response.
Probably
plan.
has his side muted.
So risk assessment / emergency response plan. Right. Okay.
In the wrong meeting. Yeah. Dave, can you just...
That's okay. No problem.
iPad 4.
Emergency response plan.
Okay. I'm trying to figure this out so we get the right person.
Emergency response plan.
Get it.
Response plan. Oh. Okie doke. Sure. No problem. Bye.
Okay. If you are going to have conversations other than in connection with the OSCAL Central online program, please have the courtesy to mute yourself when you do. We are getting way more information about non-OSCAL Central stuff than I think anybody on the call wants. Thank you. Okay, I was indicating that access to the archive programs is available through our website, oscalcentral.com, or directly on YouTube. And we have in the past had some technological hiccups with this, so a couple of the past shows are not available. Our apologies for those of you who have asked. What we have is uploaded and available. Our program today will lead off with some highlights from coming events of interest to OSCAL 2-Rail. I'm going to have Bob Jellin, who is the distinguished editor of our quarterly journal, The Coupler, tell us a little bit about what he is working on right now in the upcoming issue. And I would note that our next OSCAL Central online program will be on Sunday, October 27 at 4 p.m. Eastern. Watch for program announcements and invitations. Now, in terms of upcoming shows, the Indianapolis OSCAL show will take place on Friday and Saturday, September 20th at the La Quinta Inn in Indianapolis, Indianapolis South. The Strasburg, Pennsylvania O-Scale Two-Rail Show will take place on October 12th at the Strasburg, Pennsylvania Fire Company. The new Cleveland O-Scale Show will take place on November 2 and 3 at the UAW Hall. Okay, Jesus. If you need to do that, mute yourself. And the NMRA Central Indiana Multi-Scale Show with an O-Scale area set aside will take place on November 23rd at the Hendricks County Fairgrounds in Danville, Indiana. And you can get all of the specifics for that by going on O-Scale Central and looking at coming events. Our feature interview today will be with Dan Dowdy, who's the editor and publisher of the online magazine O-Scale Resource. Dan has his finger on where the scale is and where it's going. We look forward to hearing from him. Our second guest will be Dennis Brennan of Brennan's Model Railroading. Dennis has a broad product line as a manufacturer and a particular interest to O-Scalers as a line of structures based on building by the legendary O-Scale pioneer Frank Ellison. Dennis will tell us all about that. Finally, as promised and indicated, I will have a quick PowerPoint presentation on my layout, which features elements of three famous O-Scale two-rail layouts, including John Armstrong's Canandaigua Southern, as well as some photos that I just took. We will save some time for good and welfare at the end of the program, all of this, including news you can use. And what I want to do at this point is to give Bob Jellin an opportunity to tell us a little bit about the O-Scale Central coupler and the articles and features that are going to be in the upcoming issue. Can you give us just a couple minutes on that, Bob?
Absolutely, David. I'm trying to get my camera on here, but I promise not to cough or have conversations about here we go, anything not work related. So this coupler is actually not going together. It is together. We have it's focusing fairly heavily on electric modeling, both traction and heavy electric. We'll have an article on a simple article, mind you. I want to point out here that we don't compete with Dan Dowdy. Hopefully we do some things that complement what he does with his magazine. That's the premier thing if you want information in O-Scale. But for our members of O-Scale Central, we'll have a couple of articles from people who are actually members of O-Scale Central. One is going to be the Milwaukee Road layout in Avery, which is actually in Duluth, and it is James Schultz's layout. He's doing a lot of hand-laid track. It's not a big basement, but he's doing some really nice work. That will be one feature. And then Ed has written a nice article on what it takes to be involved in traction in O-Scale, both what's available now, what's been done in the past, the fact that it is practical to run your trains on overhead lines, overhead wire. So this will be more on traction. We also have the final installment of a move of a layout for an O-Scale layout from outside of Washington, D.C. to Florida, with a little bit of information on how the carts were designed for moving things, how the new building was designed to take the essentially the same footprint and use it. And then looking ahead, the O-Scale magazine coming up toward the end of the year for the O-Scale Central members, we'll take a better look at narrow gauge. We're going to look at different types of narrow gauge, why it's popular, a layout that's been used or that is O-Scale, and why there are some really nice overlaps. If it works out, we may also have a smaller narrow gauge layout. I'm trying to, what is it, ON 30, that uses that kind of in-between track. But I have to tell you, being in Colorado, I just went through Chama, and you look at the grades, you look at the curves, you look at the equipment. It's easy to understand why narrow gauge is so popular in O-Scale and what you can do with it. And also we have Carl Sorensen online. I see him. We're going to, in the next issue, not this one we're putting together now, but the next one later this year, we're going to have a couple of layouts that are outside. One is in California, and one is the one that Carl is working on up in Idaho. And some of the unique things he's come up with in terms of bench work and what it takes to do an outside layout, and then some of the history that goes back through him and his father, with some of the brass models he has. So those are the things we'll have in the next two issues. If you have any coming events, I need them today for upcoming events. Otherwise, that issue is pretty much buttoned down. We're just adding a few final things from David Vaughn, photos from the prototype modelers group that had met, I believe, in St. Louis. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that's going to be the other thing we have in it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Dan. And I would note that while this O-Scale Central Online program is open to everybody, you don't have to be a member. The quarterly journal that Bob Jellin edits, which is really good stuff, is only available to members. So it is yet another incentive to join O-Scale Central. So thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate your briefing. We're going to turn directly to Dan Dowdy. Most of you know Dan from his turn as editor of O-Scale Resource, but he is a man of many parts. And what I want to do is to introduce you to him in person. You've certainly seen his magazine, and to have him give us a bit of background on his modeling, and then turn to the magazine and how it works. There are some really neat features of it, and he's really carrying the flag for O-Scale 2-rail right now. He's also a real pioneer in 3D printing. I noticed Jay Criswell is also on the call. They are co-conspirators, and I want to get his views on where he sees the scale going. And without any more of an introduction, I want to introduce you all to Dan Dowdy. Take it, Dan.
All right. Well, you had some questions. You said you were going to give me some softball questions. So,
right. How did you get started in O-Scale 2-rail?
Well, before we get that, I just want to make sure that diplomatic is not what anybody has ever called me. So I do have some notes here that I typed up so I wouldn't get off the beaten path or go off on a tangent. I sometimes say things I shouldn't. So anyway, how did I get started? Can I share my screen?
Please.
Wait. Oh, I guess I can. Okay. What do you see?
Yeah. I see a picture of you as a child. And
oh, yeah. See, I'm the cute one on the left. Okay, so my dad was into Lionel. And so I was brought up with trains. Not only was he in Lionel, but we're from Janesville, Wisconsin originally, where that was the headquarters of the Parker Pen Company back in the day. So he was an exec with them. So when he had to go to trade shows and stuff, he was high enough up in the company where he could take those few extra days and go by train. So he and I traveled all over the country pre-Amtrak, which was really cool. So trains have been inbred in me. This picture with the cat, that's circa 1965. This was the beginning of the Richmond, Danville, and Southern, which is what I call my model railroad. And you can see there a Lionel 2383, which for people who are in the Lionel are probably pooping their pants right now, because I just took a can of red spray paint and shot it. And my dad had these little decals made for the name. So all the Lionel stuff that we had back in the day got painted this ugly red, and we had a railroad. And just historically, this whole railroad came from what could have been starting in Richmond and ending up in Memphis, but basically it's a play on words. My brother is Richard, My dad's name was John, and of course I'm Dan. So that's how he came up with the name, and I've just kind of stuck with it. So after graduating high school and still having this Lionel stuff that at that time Lionel was being made, I think, by Fundamentals, owned by General Mills. And that stuff was really crap. And I just wasn't happy with it. I wasn't too worried about the third rail. As you can see here, all our main line was guard grade, so that was pretty fancy back in the day. But I wanted something a little more, so I decided to sell all that and go into to two rail. 1978. Wow, I bought my first O-scale brass locomotive, and that was a West Side Q4B. Why? Because I thought it looked cool. I had no idea, but it was a neat engine. Right after that, in the beginning of the 80s, I was a part of the Southern Wisconsin O-scalers. We built a large portable layout, and we set up in shopping malls. In fact, we were the first two-rail modular group to go in the Train Fest. And we were also set up at the '84 National Convention in Chicago. And that included Nick Manarino, who's still with us, Larry Bunce, and a few other guys who have since passed away, but that was a lot of fun. 1986, I decided to go back to school and make something of myself. And once that was done, we moved down to Naperville. And that's where I met Ted Schneff and Merlin from Caboose Stop Hobbies. There's a show on the out here. It used to be every month. I think it still is at the Page County Fairgrounds. And when I walked in there not knowing anything, and I saw Ted and Merlin with actual two-rail stuff on the table to buy, I was shocked because I'd never seen that before. So we got friendly with those guys. Ted invited us up to his place. He had work sessions every weekend. And it was basically trade work for lunch. So that's what we did for a couple of years, both Amy and myself. And, learn how to spike switches, learn how to do scenery, basically using his layout as a test bed for what we were trying to do. And that worked out very well. And then in 2000, we bought this house in DeWitt, Illinois. Had a basement, 29 by 27, but I thought that was good enough for what I was able to do. I didn't want to build something like Ted had, for God's sake. That was just ridiculous. But something that was more manageable that I could build before I died. And I've also heard horror stories of people who built a layout and then found out it didn't work for them. So I asked Ted to design it for me so I wouldn't have that issue. And here's kind of the layout he came up with. I don't have a decent schematic of this layout, but basically it's around the wall. We do a loop in the middle where the turntable is. This is the lower section. And then we head up the Widowmaker, which is a 4.9% grade to get to the upper level. And we have a reverse loop up there. So it's basically two dog bones. And then we have a lot of yard track for switching. But this is the basement I was presented with. You can see this beautiful green color that I guess is pretty historically accurate for old houses. But this wall was poured concrete and it was holding the house up and it had to go. So first couple of years we saved our pennies and we had to get an engineer in here to get rid of this and put a beam in. And then once that was done, I could start constructing the layout. You'll see this hole over here for it used to be a furnace duct. And that becomes important because that hole from the other side is where where the upper deck was going to be. And the only thing that correlated the 4.9% grade was the fact that this is what we had to hit. Notice the brick here, then we go back to poured concrete, which was pretty unusual for a house this old. The house was built in 13. So anyway, that's why the grade was so high. We couldn't go any lower than that, and we had the bench work, so away we went. But I'm not going to cover the entire layout here, but suffice to say that this is Amy's part of the basement. That's it. Everything else is me. So the magazine. When I started in O-scale, this was the magazine of choice, O-Scale Railroading, and it was a decent magazine. It had O-Scale in it. I mean, that's what was important. And I always thought it was a great magazine. And I believe this was done by the guy in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. You guys might know more than that. But anyway, after this, we come to O-Scale News. And this is a magazine that I really enjoyed. It was nicely done. Greg Heyer, who was the editor, and was really the heart and soul of that publication. He was a good writer and a great photographer. And the ads in this magazine, of course, back in the day before internet, I mean, there were probably 40 to 50 different ads. And I just love the magazine. I love the layout. I love the tone of it. Later, we got another new magazine. So here we are, O-Scale, 2 paper magazines running at the same time. And of course, this was O-Scale Trains. And unfortunately, O-Scale News started falling behind their publication dates, so they had all kind of problems. And then unfortunately, Greg passed away, and that was pretty much the end of that. So this was the new flag bearer for O-Scale. And I liked it, I'll admit, and I'm going to be very careful here. I always liked 48 to the foot more than O-Scale Trains, and I can't. I've said in my last editorial, I'm not sure why, if it was just the layout or the content, I don't know. There was just something about it that I really enjoyed. And now I'm going to really get into some dark territory, but I thought that the editorial content in this magazine started to get a little preachy, not just my own opinion. We're going to do it this way, and that's the way to go. And then I'll very briefly touch on one more thing that'll get me in trouble. Is there was a very public blow up of the editor and a custom builder who did some work for him that apparently wasn't up to his standards. He brought in another custom builder, and the whole thing went public into all the forums back in the day. And I didn't like it. I thought it was very unprofessional. That's just my opinion. Still a great magazine, but I just didn't, there's some things I didn't like about it. So about 12 years ago, Glenn and I were sitting around, and of course, well, hey, we can do better than that. I mean, what's only a magazine? But we started in 2013 with our first issue, and all the back issues are up there. You can go back and look at them and laugh at the first couple of them, because the content was great. The presentation was kind of iffy, but I just wanted to take things in a little different direction, and I'll talk about that later. But we were basically using the model railroad hobbyist model of being a free magazine, advertiser supported. Of course, those guys being an all-scale magazine have a lot more ads and a lot more resources and a lot more money than we were ever going to do with the O-Scale resource. But we gave it a shot, and it started to gain popularity. Of course, the price was right. Anyway, Glenn left the magazine, and Navy and I started an LLC, and that was it. We continue to do this, and we have an O-Scale magazine on the opposite months of this. There's our catalog of back issues. They're all available. So what makes us different? What did we want to do? I didn't want to do reviews. Reviews are a slippery slope, especially when you have advertisers to answer to. I'd rather put products in the news section and let the readers decide. All the new products are linked to their website, so you can see for yourself. If a product's not up to par, somebody's going to complain about it. In this day of Facebook and all this stuff, you can go on any forum or Facebook, and you'll see who likes what and who doesn't like what, and it gets to be a free for all. And I just didn't want to be part of that with the reviews. Just look what happened with the SD40-2 from Third Rail. I mean, my God, some of the stuff that's been going on about that poor engine is just ridiculous. People like it, people don't like it, yada, yada, yada. So we didn't want to get involved in that. I also don't do any heavy editorialing. I don't want to tell you what to think or how to model. I've gotten a little more undiplomatic, but I try not to get too carried away. But what I mean by that is I don't want to direct the hobby. That's not my job. My job is just to show stuff and feature things that I think are interesting and let you decide how you want to do it or what you want to do. Another thing was writing style. I let the author say what they want, and maybe you've noticed this, maybe you haven't, but in Model Railroader, maybe a few years ago before they were bought out, I swear to God, you could read that magazine, and the entire magazine looked and sounded like it was written by one guy. All the articles were so heavily edited into what they wanted, and it just I don't know, the voice of the author got lost. So we have authors from all over the world, and I want their flavor to come through. Obviously, we check it for punctuation and spelling and that kind of stuff. And when Amy does her final proof, if she has a question that doesn't make sense to her, she'll come to me and say, what's this guy talking about? And I'll either say, well, this is a model railroad thing, everybody will get it. Or I'll look at it and be just as confused as she is, and we'll get back to the author and straighten it out. But I don't like whacking up people's stories, articles. I want them to come through, and we want to get the flavor of what they're doing. We also, of course, love pictures. Now, to be fair, we don't have a page count. I have taken over the editorship of the National S-Scale magazine, the Dispatch. And now with that particular magazine, now I feel for what Martin and these other guys were going through, because it's 32 pages and you can't go over, and you have these big, beautiful pictures and you can't use them because you don't have your room. But with our magazine, I don't have that issue. I can do whatever I want. So we really focus on larger pictures. I know that people have complained in the past with a magazine that not only editorialized their content, but shrunk the pictures down, and they just didn't like the outcome. I want people to see what the author's doing. So that's a big thing, and of course, we can only do that because we're online. I'm also a modeler, and I make mistakes, and I don't mind showing those mistakes. As an example, I did an article on this Thomas tank car. It was a 6-dome tank car, and I thought it was a great kit, and it was a wine car. And if you notice, the beam here is hollow, and then of course in the real car it was covered. So I thought I'd get really fancy and make this more prototypical. Of course, when I did that, then the darn thing didn't fit in the chassis anymore. So I had to go through all that, and I did it in the article. I said, if you do this, you're going to screw yourself down the line, and here's how I fixed it. But showing mistakes and just, I don't know, it makes it more human, where we all make mistakes. And we all have issues, and I don't mind telling people where I screw up. To me, that's a big thing. I also want people to start building again. This is very important. And as an example, the Intermountain Boxcar Reefer, I mean, you can pick those up 15, 20 bucks all day long at a show. And the instructions for that car was 4 pages and didn't really show much. So what did I do? Well, I went nuts and did a 22-page instruction on how to build that car, step by step, everything. And I thought, if it helps a couple of people, I got a lot of nice comments on this, because with following these instructions, anybody can build this car, and they're great cars. And at least you're building something. You're just seeing it's not that tough. And God forbid, if you totally screw up, you're out 15 bucks, you start over. Not a big deal. But I just want people to get back into building things, and that's one of the ways. Wrapping up the magazine, things have kind of come full circle. I got a call from Mike Kugel, who worked at O Scale Trains. He and Joe were in a partnership, and he left and started OST Publications. This was way back, and wanted me to produce his website for him because that was my main job at the time. So we did that for him. Right after that, we hired Jeb Friegel, who used to do the advertising for O Scale Trains, and now he works for us. And then a few months later, we got Brian Scase to do some articles for us. And now Martin has climbed on board and is doing articles for us. So like I said, we kind of come full circle. Martin also does the a magazine for New Tracks Modeling, which I would check out. It's a great thing that he's doing with Jim Kello and New Tracks. So anyway, this is us, Model Railroad, or the oscaleresource.com. We also do 3D printing, and I kind of saw what was going on early, but it was Glenn that really got things going, Glenn Guerrera. He was using rapid prototyping from a company in Indiana for making his molds. And once he got the prototype back, then he could do the waxes and everything else. And he said, well, why can't we do this? Because it was nice, but it was awfully expensive. I mean, you thought Shapeways was bad. This company was 10 times worse, but they were good. And I saw that Sarah had a printer, and a couple of our other authors had printers. So I thought, well, let's try it. And boy, what a roller coaster. I've written some articles on resin printing, which you can go back and read in the previous issues. But the point is, if you can draw it, we can print it. And I just lost my train of thought. Boy, that sucks. Yeah, if you can draw it, we can print it. And the printers are, it's getting cheaper to do. It's very, it's not easy. You're going to have a lot of mistakes. And that's something I tried to point out in my articles on 3D printing. You just don't push a button and have it come out. But it is a viable option for making things that are not available. And it's just something that we decided to get into because Sarah, for instance, has put some beautiful files online that anybody can download. But a lot of guys can't print them. So we decided to offer custom printing for that type of thing. Here's an example. These are Sarah's doors and hardware that people have asked us to print. And we just charge a flat platen fee plus setup time, which is just this time to make these supports. This was a weird one we did for I don't know how to pronounce that, Flanix. Anyway, it's a close weapon system that we have a gentleman out east who has the USS Wisconsin in his basement in a 1/4 inch scale. So you can imagine how big it is. And we wrote him up in the magazine, but he needed 6 of these because the Wisconsin was refitted with these in its last refit. So, you know, stuff like this is what we do. He got the file, he purchased the file. We just made the prints for him. Let me spin over to here. The other thing with 3D printing, and I got to give Jay props because I had not even thought of this until he and Sarah were doing these burnout castings. So we decided to do this. This is a truck. This is an old-timey passenger truck that Glenn designed for himself. And if you look at the parts here, and then we spin over here, you know, here's your spring. There's the spring top and bottom. There's the complete side frame. This is all done in casting resin. So what we do with all these different parts, there's the end beam with its protrusions. That's there. So what we do is we do these parts and send them off to the foundry in California, and they're cast into beautiful brass pieces. At least we hope they are. It was a lot of fiddling. We did a lot of experimentation, as I know Jay did. We've been talking back and forth. David Vaughn got some of our stuff, and I hope he was happy with them. we did a job for him, and the first job was kind of iffy, but I think the last time he got some parts were very usable, and we're continuing to try to improve this process. So that's, I think, the exciting thing of the hobby, when you can come up, if you need one item or two items or four items, and it's not worth having somebody do a wax and the molds and the whole bit. This is really something where you can send this off and get your brass parts 2 weeks later. Other than that, I think it's a great time to be in O-Scale. I look back and I look back at the 1983 was the last year Walthers did their O-Scale catalog. And you look back at that, a lot of people look back with fond memories. I look back and say, well, where the hell are the engines? There aren't any. Where are the cars? They're all kits. The vast majority were kits that were designed in the 40s and 50s. And look at what we have now, and look at what's coming out now. I don't see an issue with model railroading at any scale. I think it's getting more popular. Maybe not specifically our scale, but our scale is doing pretty well. But I think model railroading in general is really taking off again, because you got these 40-something people that want a hobby, and back in the day with Lionel, it was the kids that were doing it. Well, those days are gone, and you're never going to get those days back. But by incorporating the electronics that we have in model railroading, DCC, and all the other stuff, and whether you're going to build it or buy it, it doesn't matter. It's still a fascinating hobby with a lot of facets to it. What's going to happen 10 years from now? I don't know. I'll probably be dead, but I think it'll be just fine. I think it's going to continue to evolve. May take off depends on people. You look at the people on this Zoom call, and you got a lot of old people here. And yet you go on Facebook and you got a lot of young people there, and they're all doing O-Scale, and a lot of them are building. And the shows don't always reflect that, but social media definitely does. So I think we're in a good spot, and I think it's going to continue to grow, and hopefully well for O-Scale, because there's just so many things you can do. Shelf layouts are becoming a big deal now, where you don't have to have a lot of room. The secondary market is obscene. You can get all kinds of stuff in the secondary market at very reasonable prices. And I'll hit the thing too, is shows. You got to go to these big shows, whether it's Chicago, Indy, O-Scale West. Those are where you find the deals. If you can, support those shows and support the dealers at those shows, because like I say, the secondary market is a great place to pick up a lot of equipment. So that's about all I got to say. I've talked too long, but that kind of gives you where I came from, what I do. And if you have any questions and I haven't pissed anybody off, I'll try to answer them.
Well, if you haven't pissed anybody off, you're probably not working hard enough, because we come to expect that you're going to throw a couple of bombs into the.
I tried to be nice. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I want to thank Dan Dowdy for the contributions that he has made to the scale. If you have not plugged into O-Scale Resource, it is 120 pages, give or take, every 2 months of solid O-Scale 2-rail. And Dan indicated you can't beat the price, but it's pretty hard to beat the content as well. And one of the things, I'm a real Luddite when it comes to technology, but one of the things that is really cool, when you go on into the magazine and go on to the advertisements, if you're interested, click on the ad, and it connects you to the website. So it's magic. You don't just have that little eighth of a page. You have access to the entire advertiser's catalog and information. And I just think that is incredibly cool. So I want to thank, and Dan, by the way, has been very helpful to O-Scale Central in terms of getting some of our projects off the ground. He's been very supportive. So thank you very much, Dan. Appreciate your time.
Very welcome, and I enjoy doing it.
Great. We are going to turn now to Dennis Brennan and for a quick review of what he has been up to. Dennis owns Brennan's Model Railroading, which for starters, produces ballast and other essentials, but has gone farther afield, in particular with a line of kits based on Frank Ellison's printing, and I want to introduce Dennis, whom you probably have heard of by way of his business, but he's a man of many parts, and in addition to the work that he's already doing, Dennis is going to be joining O-Scale Central as our manufacturer's liaison to try and reach out and do a little more direct work with our manufacturer. So Dennis, introduce yourself, give us a quick rundown of your background, and tell us about the projects you're working on, particularly the Ellison series, which I think are just really neat. And for those of people who may not know, give us a paragraph on who Frank Ellison was. But here you are, Dennis Brennan. Thanks for appearing.
Well, thank you, David, and I assume everybody can hear me well. My name is Dennis Brennan, and I've been in business since 1997. To start out, I graduated from Rutgers University with a degree in filmmaking and photography. So I was an art major, and I worked in TV station. I've had my own still photography and motion photography work studio. And I was brought to Kansas City to head up a studio, and I was doing commercials, producing and directing TV commercials. I finally went on my own. And I did that for a number of years and retired from that business when I was 50. And I had started Brennan's Model Railroading just as a fun little thing because I discovered ballast. And at the time, the only ballast available really was Woodland Scenics. And I have nothing against Woodland Scenics, don't get me wrong. They make a great product. But for O-Scale, my personal opinion was it was a little too small. And I set out to find something that really worked for me. And when I did, my wife is the one who said, well, why don't you sell it? And I took her up on that, and the rest is history. And that's led to everything that I'm doing today. And so what am I doing today? All right. Well, I do model railroad photography. I've had a number of photos featured on the covers of classic toy trains. Let me see if I can get that up there right now. All right, I assume everybody can see that one. That was a cover shot that I did, and it was a little, this is a diorama, believe it or not. It's on a 4x8 sheet of plywood. I designed it specifically for the cover. So I've done that a lot. And what you're looking at here is my philosophy about modeling is basically less is more. And so if you look at what I've done here, I didn't treat the snow as a blizzard, which a lot of people seem to want to do, which is okay. But I just wanted it to look like a little dusting, you know, one of those snowfalls that happened and it's kind of blowing around and it could lead to something more, but that's it. And you can see how that works on the street. And to give you a little bit of input into how I came up with that, that was a happy accident. I use baking soda, and when you do baking soda and you pour it into a fine like flour sifter screen, shaker thing. The first fall through is you got to let that happen first. Because the minute you pour it in, it's just going to dump stuff, go right through the screen. And usually I have a piece of paper underneath it to catch that. And then I start doing the sprinkling. Well, I did it on the street first and it dumped a whole pile of stuff on the street. And I thought, oh God, I didn't want to sweep that up and vacuum it and start all over. So I thought, what if I just give it a little quick blow? And I blew on it, and that's what you see. So work with your mistakes. I mean, just, like Dan Dowdy said, I try to use my mistakes as an opportunity to do something new. Rather than looking at it as a problem, I look at it as an opportunity. All right, enough about that. Another favorite cover shot is this one, where I use the fog machine in the studio, and again, a very light dusting of snow. And so other things that, well, I've done night shots like this one. And so I have a variety of types of different model photography that I do. This is one of my favorite shots. It's on my website. In fact, a lot of these pictures are on my website. This is, I've had so many people look at that and say, hey, where is that? That looks like something I've seen in New York, or sometimes Detroit, sometimes Chicago. And it's not any particular area, but to be honest or fair, I grew up out east. I grew up in New Jersey. So this is the typical kind of East Coast scenery that one would see. And so this isn't any particular scene in real life, but it's just kind of what I see in my head. And I saw this and I put it out there. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm a high rail modeler. In other words, I do 3-rail, but modeling is modeling. And so the only difference between what 2-railers are doing and what I'm doing is in my track. And maybe I have some oversized couplers. I haven't gone far enough to try to switch couplers and whatnot. And that's only because I like playing with my Lionel trains. Now these are all modern versions, but I always wanted to be able to do that. And when I was a kid playing with my 4x8 layout, I would imagine those scenes from the Lionel catalog, even though it was green painted plywood and I had a couple loops of track, I could see the scene, imagine the scene from the Lionel catalog artwork drawings. And now the difference is I can realize the vision. So that's that. Now, here's one of my kits. This here, right here, is a freight dock kit. I think it's the first kit that I ever came out with. It's a Craftsman kit. I wrote the instructions, and this is a pet peeve of mine, following up on what Dan said. Instructions are usually, a lot of times, are really leave a lot to be desired. You think about, you start reading them and they assume you know a heck of a lot more than you do. And so I thought, well, I'm going to make sure that people can build this. And so not only do I explain how I did it, I show how I did it, because I can photographically illustrate things since that's what I do. So my instructions are complete with photographs and what kind of paint and sequence and all the things that you need to know to build a kit. And if you follow my instructions, you can build any one of my kits. Now let's see. Oh, this was an overview of the Sandy Harbor terminal layout. that I built as a project layout. And this is based on Malcolm Furlow's Carbondale Central. Although it looks nothing like it, really, I kept the harbor and I kept the track plan, but everything else came from my imagination. And the background buildings, for those of you who might know by looking at them, these are all kit bashed HO structures. And so I forced the perspective. And anyway, that's that. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Now, as far as the Ellison line of kits, the first kit was, you've seen this picture, but this was my first kit. This was the Oblong Box Company. Now, Frank Ellison has been somebody that captured my imagination from the time I was 8 years old, and I discovered him in a bookstore, a used bookstore. It was 1958. I was in like 3rd grade, and I went into this bookstore looking for some used comics. I was a big Superman, Batman fan back at the time. And I came across model railroading, or trains was always my hobby. But I wasn't actually a model railroader until I read Frank Ellison. And the book that the magazine I came up with was a Toy Trains magazine that was produced probably in 1950 or 52. And it was about this very building. He wrote about how he constructed the building out of cardboard. And it was kind of amazing because there were no not hobby shops like we know them, if there were any. So he drew the corrugations on his building. He drew, oftentimes would draw in the window panes or ink them in on a piece of cellophane, and doors were often drawn in. I decided to do a series of Ellison kits. Only the idea behind it is, if Frank Ellison were alive today, here's how we would make these structures using modern materials and methods. And of course, I can't ever build anything without putting my touch on it. So I've kept Frank's dimensions, but I felt free to cut down on windows or change something around. Like in this building, he had a little porch here where this little office extension is. I made it, I bumped it out and put the stairway down that one side of it. And then I also put in a car or a freight dock for pickup trucks or truck loading. My next kit was the Haphazard Packing Company. Now I should say that, going back to Oblong for a second, sorry, I'm jumping around, but that was all cardboard. I used art card, actually art photo mounting board for the interior of that building. And then the exterior was corrugated sheets that I found in Joanne Fabrics, and then went to the manufacturer and had them send them to me. And then to apply them to the building, they were cut to the size, and then they had 3M sticky on them. So it was just basically peel and stick. And the base of that building was basswood. Now this building here, Haphazard Packing Company, that is all basswood construction. It's got a complete interior with a stairway that goes up to this second level. And again, my instructions were assumed you never did anything like this. The third building is the Richmond Packing Company. And Richmond Packing Company was based on what Frank said was an actual house that in his fictional story that was owned by a rich person, and then it was subsequently abandoned, and then somebody came in and turned it into a packing company for or a meat producer. Cattle would come in. I developed this also the pen, but I never released it because there were a couple issues with the way it was being put together, and I got those solved, but then I just didn't get around to releasing that pen, but that will be available. And the last, but not least, because I've got identified a dozen buildings that I'm going to do. The last one is Sankey Wanky Coffee Company. This whole back wall, you never see in his, because he didn't finish it. That you never see it. In fact, in most of the buildings that Frank did, you never saw one of the walls. And if you did see a wall, he built, but if you didn't see it, he didn't bother to build it. He just put in a piece of cardboard back there. And I know this from, I'm in touch with somebody who actually owns his original buildings. When I'm doing these kits, if he has one, he'll send me
I'm
pictures.
coming.
And so I have him send me pictures of all four sides and also take some measurements. And in most cases, I found that he does just the indication of a line drawing on the back of the building that you didn't see. And so I use that as a basis. And so my next kit that I'll be doing for Ellison, I already drew it up, but it's at the laser printer, and he's already working on something for me now. That's not an Ellison kit. That next kit is going to be the Burr Ice Company, which is a triangular shaped brick building that used to be part of a brewery, and I assume it was the powerhouse for the brewery. And that was actually based on a real structure being used that way that Frank Ellison found. And then he made a, model of it. And the genius of Frank Ellison, in my opinion, because I've made these kits and I've studied them, and he is perfect at selective compression. If you want to learn how to selectively compress something and still maintain the flavor of it, just look at the buildings that he does, which is why I would never change any of his actual dimensions. Why do that? And the other thing that struck me about Frank, and which really appealed to me as an 8-year-old, was the story he told about the building. He made up oftentimes, at least in toy trains he did. Now, maybe in Model Builder magazine that Lionel did and Model Railroader, he may not have done that to that degree, but the story he told gave the building character. And so, again, what that tells me is, if you're building something, and I don't care what the structure is, you have to think about, where did it come from? Think about where it came from. Think about where it was originally, and how has it changed by the time you decided to model it? And if you do that and start thinking about that, that breathes some time into your building. If you can put, we're not just modeling 4 walls or whatever, you're modeling the building over time, which is what weathering really is. But think of it in terms of, how did it start and what changes might they have made over that time period? And then if you give your building a purpose, this doesn't have to be a coffee company. This could be any factory that you want. But if you give it a purpose and give it a name that highlights what may be in the building, then your modeling is going to improve, because then you'll know what kind of props, okay, if you want to call them props, but details that you can add to it. So that's part of my modeling philosophy. And one quick thing, and I'll be done here. This is an example of my instructions. That's you can see that they're completely illustrated, and I show not only how to, the sequence, but the tools that I use and suggest where you can get those tools. And I have tips that I haven't seen anywhere else. You'll notice I build my structures, always use a flat glass cutting board for my base, and I've taped a carpenter's square to the corner of it. Why do I do that? Well, that gives you a surface, a flat surface, perfectly flat surface to model on, and you've got a perfect right angle to follow. Those two things alone make a big difference in when you're putting a model together. And the other thing that I always do, and I know a lot of you guys probably do it too, but the best way, this one is a little bit different because of its construction, but typically I will put two sides of a building, the front and the side, and then the back and the other side together, and then join those two sides. If you make sure that those two are at perfect right angles, then when you put the two pairs together, you're going to have a perfectly rectangular building. It's simple, it's easy, and that's, I guess that's about all I can say about that. And one last thing, here's my ballast. That's my ballast. Here's real railroad ballast. And then I tried to shoot a similar size shot of mine. And this is Atlas. Well, this is Atlas O track, but I think you can see this is part of my Superior Sand ground cover, and this is my real coal. And that's just some of my stuff. Anyway, that's all I have for that, and that's about it. And
Thank you, Dennis. Give us a website that people can go to, and that'll be your closing remark. What's the
okay,
website?
well, I hope I didn't take too much time here. My website is www.brennansmodelrr.com, and Brennan's is my last name with an S. BRENNANS. RR, like in railroad.com.
Super. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and I think people got a lot out of it, and we'll be looking for the Ellison line of your structures, as well as your Brennan's finest ballast. Thank you.
Quick question. for
You're
Dennis.
welcome. Sure.
Quick question for Dennis. Did you ever have any contact with Fred Dole?
Yes.
Is he
Yes.
the person that had the Ellison models?
Well, what Fred did, yes, Fred had the Ellison models, but it wasn't from Fred that I got my information from Kerry, I think his name is Kerry Williams. He bought Fred's stuff. He bought
Kerry
those.
Williams out in Chicago.
Yes. And Kerry has been a super guy. And what Fred did, I got that first thing that Fred issued. Fred photographed the oblong box company on all four sides, and then made a big full-scale print, and you cut out the sides, and then basically you cut out his print and pasted it up. And I saw that and I thought that's pretty cool, but it still was not too, not 3D. It was too flat for me. So anyway.
I met Fred
Thank you.
sometime
All right.
around 1991. He came to the Baltimore Society of Model Engineers and photographed our layout, and then it appeared in the April '92 issue of O-Scale what was it called? O-Gauge Train?
O-Gauge Railroading.
O-Gauge Railroading at
Yeah,
that point.
yeah.
All right, we got to move along, guys.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Third shot is actually mine. I promised a layout tour. We're gonna have to compress it by quite a bit. And here is, let's do this. Okay. This is a PowerPoint, and I want to talk about my layout, which is actually comprised of 3 historic layouts. Biggest one and best known is John Armstrong's Canandaigua Southern. This railroad was featured in Great Model Railroads 2016, and much has been done since that time. I want to do a real quick on it. This is the layout track plan. I put these 3 historic layouts together, and I figured out how they would fit together by looking at a mock-up of the space, photocopying the track plans for the 3 component railroads, all of which had been covered, change them to the same level of magnification, and then cut them apart and played paper dolls to see where the layout would fit. I eventually came up with a double-track dog bone, 1 main line in each direction with staging and turnaround tracks at the end. And I fit them into an 18-foot wide by 90-foot long space. The layouts on the left side are in what we call the front room, and it consisted basically of Ted Stepik's layout, but I added to Ted's layout in the back room, the John Armstrong layouts and the Ed Rapé layouts. So the lower staging loop, and all of these are connected, even though they involve as many as 5 different levels. And this is the lower level in the back room. This is the medium level, and these are the upper level. The upper level staging loop you actually walk underneath, and the lower staging loop is down about 32 inches, and it takes about 35 or 40 minutes to go around the layout to get all the way around. I have a more detailed version. I'll simply indicate what it looks like, where I took the different layouts, all of which, as I said, were originally published, and I have highlighted in red the components that I used to switch around and place at different parts of the layout. This, for example, is John Armstrong's layout, and these several pieces right here and here and here are all parts that were taken and incorporated into my new layout. This, many of you may recall, is John's famous cosmetic curve called photographer's curve, and it has been cut up and installed. Cutting up heritage layouts involves a certain gulping. The first cut is the hardest. This is what photographer's curve looks like when you cut it apart. And as I said, the first cut is the hardest. And I ended up, I had a fellow that worked for me who had a 2-ton truck, and we put all of these sections into the truck in slices that we knew we could get out of the basement out of which they're being taken and into the new basement. And we have been very fortunate with the heritage layouts. It preserves the modeler's legacies. All of these layouts were well built and important. It preserves their craftsmanship, and it makes the layouts available for present and future generations. One of the real joys that I have had out of this is the Armstrong family has a family reunion around every set of holidays, and they come down and get tours of the layout and are actually able to see the layout. We're now into great-grandchildren. These are John's 3 sons, and these are various grandchildren and so on. And it's been really neat to have them be able to do it. Would I do it again? Well, it depends on finding a suitable layout. Is there something special about the layout? And then the practicalities in terms of, do I have the resources and the space to take the layout out of where it is? Do I have new space for it to go into? And can I make a plausible track plan? It's easier if you start with one layout. 3 is a little harder. It doesn't save time and it doesn't save money, but it does save the heritage that we have. And for that, I have been very grateful. I did take some recent photographs just to illustrate some of the features. This is a trestle off of John Armstrong's layout, which we have refurbished. We have put in a place where it can be
Hey, Rocky.
where it can be viewed. And I'm trying to figure out how to get to the next. Whoops. This is not working as well as I thought. Sorry about that.
Rocky. Dave, I'll take a quick or ask you a quick question. Did you keep the outside rail on John's or the other?
I have not. This is not a museum, it's an operating layout. My trains are all DCC. I will say, as you may know from working in these areas, it takes a lot of work to take an older layout, which was outside third rail, and DCC it, because it involves not only gapping all of the rails, but also involves powering the points and then removing the outside third rail. One of the things that you may remember from John Armstrong's layout is he built a model of Edward Hopper's Nighthawks, and I had always wanted to build it. Never really had an opportunity to do that. And eventually I inherited John's notes, project notes, photographs, drawings, etc. And I had kits made for this, and I sold them in all major scales, but basically it was a labor of love. That's the one that is on the layout. And it's more or less where John had his. Many of you are familiar with John's famous 110-foot cosmetic curve. I was able to save that and find a place to install it. And in fact, my track plan has a longer photographer's curve than John's did, and the rock work was quite distinctive. I was able to use rubber molds to actually take the existing, which is quite distinctive rock work, and made new plaster castings, and so I've got more photographer's curve rock work than John had. Many of you may know John's Super Allegheny. He actually designed this engine at the time that Allegheny's 2666s were being designed, and he wanted a dual service engine which required a four-wheel lead truck and a longer front porch and streamlining. So he designed and built one of those. I have the use of that right now. It's one of my favorite engines. It was originally designed in outside third rail, and getting the shorts out of that has been an ongoing project, and we're still not quite done with it. There is a front view of the Super Allegheny. And here is one of John's engines. I have, I think, 5 of his original steam engines on the layout. This is actually built from a Penzi J 210-4. Of all of the odd engines on the Pennsylvania Railroad, the J did not actually have a Belpaire firebox, but John decided to add one on his version. And that was kind of cool. And here is a photograph of the 210-4 in proximity to the Nighthawks diner. Some of you may know that the NMRA had Gil Reed do a painting for John in honor of his service to the NMRA that included the Nighthawks and this 210-4 and the figure of John and the engineer. Most of my layout is actually not the Armstrong layout, and I'm a nickel plate modeler. So what I have tried to do is to replicate the Midwest and have lots of cornfields and flat land. This is a set of RS-11s that are. Hey guys, can you mute yourselves, please? If you're having a non-O-scale conversation, thank you. Anyway, that's a real quick overview of my layout. I appreciate your attention to it. Let's see, where are we at? Let me see if we can get a photograph back. There we go. Okay. All right. In any event, I don't want to take up too much time, but I had promised a quick overview of my layout, and I'm happy to have put it in front of you all. We have, at this point, we're about ready for good and welfare. I want to remind people that the next program will actually be on Sunday, October 27 at 4 p.m. Eastern. I want to indicate that we have been working actively with O-Scale Central to move forward on a variety of programs to promote O-Scale and assist modelers. And we hope that these programs and the people who come on and the stories that we tell will encourage you to join and participate in O-Scale Central. Go on the website, oscalecentral.com, write me an email. My address is president@oscalecentral.com, and I would love to have you all become part of the O-Scale community. As we go through the hobby, we learn that what the hobby is really all about is not the hardware, but the people. And we are happy to try and encourage more people to participate. So I want to thank you very much for that. That concludes the formal program. It is our practice to keep the program open and the microphone open for what we loosely call good and welfare. And the good and welfare is any questions from the presentations that we have had today, any comments, any announcements, any banter back and forth, any introductions that you might want to make of yourself or other people. I note that we have on the call Jim Kello, whose Nutrax modeling is really also making an impression promoting the entire hobby. I note that Jay Criswell, who is one of Dan Dowdy's cohorts and conspirators, is on the call. We had Jay also interviewed on the call, I guess about what, a year and a half or so ago. Glad to see him here. I am undoubtedly missing some other people. Martin Breckbiel, who was the editor of O-Scale Trains before it went into an annual, is on the call. I am sure that, Paul Hansen, who is our Proto 48 coordinator, is on the call, as is Skylar Shippey, who is O-Scale Central's vice president and who will, in the line of succession, be our next president. He's also on the call. I previously introduced Bob Jelen, who has done a great job as editor of the coupler. We are now officially adjourned, and for those of you who have hung out here but need to move along, thank you for joining us. If you want to hang around, and we will have a less structured, informal discussion, we can do that. So thank you very much. We'll see you on October 27 if you can make it. And I invite in particular any questions that might be available for Dan Dowdy if he is still with us, or Dennis Brennan, who I think is still here, or anything about the real quick tour through my layout that we have. And if there are no questions, does anyone have any announcements or anything that is not related to directly to the program from today?
I'd like to say a few words about the upcoming show next weekend.
Please do.
It's 5 days away. There's going to be a lot of model train enthusiasts say they're coming. The pre-registration is preferred, but not necessary. Walk-ins are welcome. Their registration will be open at 8 o'clock Friday morning for anybody that gets there earlier. They can register. I have 4 layout tours that are roughly start anywhere from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock before the show. You need to be pre-registered in order to get into it, and in order to get the directions and to there. I will be sending out an email to anybody that is pre-registered as far as the actual directions, although I think a lot of people know from the descriptions in the location whose layouts they are.
This show is in the coming events on the oscalecentral.com website, so you can get all of the hours, the address of the show, any other information about it, including admissions and tables. So, yeah. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. And I would like to introduce Skylar Shippey, assuming that he is on, although muted and without a camera, since Skylar will be taking over as the president as of the next term. Skylar is apparently gone. All right.
I'm trying to figure out how to flip the camera.
Okay.
There we go. All right. This is my current project. 2 diamonds across the main with 172 coded rail. So that explains months and months of filing. But yeah, I guess in the same spirit as Paul, I do have the Cleveland show coming up in November. So I'll be supporting Paul in the September show, and then all effort will be motivated towards November. So that's me dealing with stuff for construction here. Oh, the other thing too, we have a called the Fall O-Scale Gathering at the Detroit Model Railroad Club. There'll be an event posted on the upcoming events page on O-Scale Central website. And it's basically a large operating session or just simply visiting us. I know there's a lot of guys who've said, oh, I haven't been up to Holly in years. Well, be a good time. That'd be October 26th. So
terrific. Skylar is a man of many parts also. He is the president of the Detroit Model Railroad Club and has been very active there. And he is also spearheading the revival of the Cleveland O-Scale show. And please go online to oscalecentral.com and open up the coming events and access the Cleveland show. It's going to be a really good show. It has been a good show over the years, and I'm delighted that Skylar is taking it over and putting some life back into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody else have anything to add? Otherwise, I would thank everyone for your attendance and your patience and your participation. And we will be adjourned in this matter.
Thanks, David.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.